Thank you again, Reem. That was a wonderful video and a perfect segue to our next session on realizing human potential for all, which is really what the SDGs are all about: human dignity, possibility, and a future for our children that is ever brighter than our past. And that is more important than ever today, as the pandemic has put so many of our gains at risk and made the decade of action even more essential to ensure human dignity for all. We have an absolutely phenomenal panel to share insights and lessons, both from global councils and from their extensive experience and expertise throughout their careers. Let me introduce them briefly. Her Excellency Mona Al-Marri serves as Vice President of the UAE's Gender Balance Council. His Excellency Dr. Tariq Al Gurg is the Chief Executive Officer of Dubai Cares. Dr. Mahmoud Mohieldin, a good friend, is the Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And Dr. Judy Kuriansky is the UN NGO representative of the International Association of Applied Psychology and a professor at Columbia University Teacher College and a clinical psychologist. I want to start this conversation with Her Excellency Mona Al-Marri and ask about the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality and SDG 5. How has this crisis affected your fight for gender equality and rights, and how should that shape government priorities now? Her Excellency Mona Al-Marri, do you have sound?
Do you hear me now?
We do.
Hello?
Excellent.
Thank
yes,
you, Elizabeth.
We hear.
Thank you. And thank you also to the World Government Summit for creating this important global platform. As you know, that during the uncertain times that we are all going through, collaboration and idea sharing gatherings such as this one help us to find innovative solutions to global challenges. All of us agree that COVID-19 crisis has shed fresh light on gender inequalities around the world. The pandemic has created unique circumstances for working women, especially working mothers. I've seen a recent research done by McKinsey shows that right now women's jobs are 1.8 times more vulnerable than men's. If we do not act immediately, then we risk increasing gender gaps and creating long-term damage across the economy and society. But I also see that international organizations and governments are recognizing the vital importance of focusing on gender equality and gender balance to ensure that we can come back from this crisis stronger than ever. This is an area where collective action is vital, Elizabeth. Governments, I think, should look at this and look at two things during this pandemic. First, they must ensure that women's voices are actively included when decisions are being made on recovery planning. Women must be around the table when planning for the post-COVID. This is necessary across all sectors. Second, I also think governments should aim to put a gender lens on recovery efforts and on their planning for future crises. By this, I mean governments should see the gender impact of their policies and programs, investing early in gender-responsive budgeting, gender-sensitive crisis management, and gender-responsive laws such as equal wage laws and childcare supports. Also, it is very important to note that SDG 5 gender equality is required to achieving all 17 SDGs. My fellow panelists are dedicated to advancing goal number 1 on no poverty, goal number 3 on health and well-being, and goal number 4 on quality education. All of our goals are interdependent. We must work together to create innovative solutions to these complex challenges. Just as the challenges are interconnected, I think also solutions must be interconnected, Elizabeth.
No, that's wonderful. And I so appreciate your starting with we can grow and become stronger than ever coming out of this crisis. And it's a real opportunity to jumpstart and accelerate so much good work that was already underway. Can I ask you to speak a little bit more about the Gender Balance Council itself and your experience there, and especially the Gender Balance Toolkit that you've designed? And you spoke about bringing a gender lens to decisions and implementation. And I imagine that comes in very, very strongly. Can you speak a bit more about that?
Sure. The UAE has always been committed to strengthening gender balance and have taken specific steps to institutionalize this commitment across all government. In 2015, the Gender Balance Council was established, and it is chaired by Her Highness Sheikha Manal bint Mohammed bin Rashid. And at the time of its founding, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and the Crown Prince of Dubai, has instructed us that the council to advance the government's gender balance agenda by driving a legislative reform. His Highness also specifically gave us a KPI to become among the world's top 25 countries in gender balance by 2021, according to the UNDP Gender Inequality Index. We make policy and legislative reforms with two intentions in mind. First and foremost, to create a more gender balanced society by closing gender gaps. And second, to become a working model in the region through advanced competitive ranking and important international reports measuring gender balance. Additionally, we have developed practical tools to enhance gender equality and create more opportunities for women to rise to leadership positions. In 2017, we've launched a gender balance guide in partnership with the OECD. This guide helps organizations to accelerate gender balance, to create more opportunities for women, and to ensure fairness of treatment between women and men. The SDG 5 Global Council is now developing a global best practices for gender balance toolkit. The toolkit will showcase successful gender balance policies, legislations, and initiatives from around the world. The toolkit will be adaptable to different country contexts, web-based, and open access. And the toolkit also has guidance and resources on advancing gender balance through economic, political, and legal empowerment of women. Importantly, also, each section has a crisis component to ensure that users are equipped with information, indicators, and country examples of how to plan for future crises. There will be information on advancing gender equality across the spectrum of rights. We recognize that without fundamental rights such as access to healthcare and education, women can't play any role in the society. I want to also highlight that the 17 SDGs have been mapped to each section of the toolkit. So alongside the tools and resources listed, users of the toolkit can see which SDG they are advancing. And I hope that the toolkit will be another resource that will help to advance gender equality and the 17 SDGs in a long-lasting way.
That sounds like a fantastic resource for everyone. And I think we now have a charge. We need a campaign for everyone to set more ambitious KPIs for themselves by 2025. Let me turn next to His Excellency Dr. Tariq Al Gurg. And I'd like to start by, I'll ask you about education, SDG 4, the impact of the pandemic, and what you think governments need to do now to play an even more impactful role in helping enhance both quality and accessibility of education, given how much impact there's been on the world's young people. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And I would like to thank also the global councils as well as the World Government Summit for emphasizing on SDG 4, which is quality education. Muna, why don't you join our board and you will perfect implementation of girls' education globally. I mean, the systems that you're putting and what we're doing globally with girls' education, there are a lot of similarities. But what I see, what's happening in the UAE, you're taking it to the next level and taking deep dives. So I salute you and your team of achieving all of this. Elizabeth, look, I might sound a bit negative to some sectors, but you see, COVID-19 did not hit every single home in the world. The health issue has we're now about 60 million people infected in the world. So if you divide that by 3, if each home has 3, so you're talking about 20 million homes which got affected by the virus. But if you look at education, Elizabeth, education got affected in every single home in the world, almost. If it's not every single home, it's every other home. So we're talking about billions of people got affected or has seen how education got affected. And if we want to resolve these issues, what COVID-19 did to education is it didn't change anything. It just amplified the support. We have to do much more on the existing things that we have to do. We've been talking about connectivity and access to technology and embedding it with education for the past 20 years. I don't know why we were shy about it for the past 20 years. You know, Corona came over one night. Half of the world switched distance learning digital. We did it. And now we're into the second year of schooling globally, fall and onwards, and we're doing it right. So my number one thing I will tell you is connectivity and access to technology. We, as education is a human right, a child right, connectivity and technology should also be a right for children and youth around the world, especially the vulnerable children, especially girls, minorities, and disabled children. And we should not leave anyone behind. And we are supporting UNICEF launching a global initiative called GIGA, that's CAPS, GIGA, which is to connect every single school in the world with internet. And we're going to launch it, hopefully announce it next week in our virtual summit, which is called Rewired. It's a global summit on education. The second is collaboration at a higher level, not only on a national level. We have to collaborate. The global agencies, the UN agencies, the global mechanism, the bilaterals, we all have to collaborate. We have the World Bank with us on this panel. They can talk more about collaboration on the higher level, how important it is. We have UNESCO on one hand, they have the learning passports, they have the Global Education Coalition that unites a lot of sectors, government, private, UN agencies, non-government together, so we can solve this problem. Dubai Cares is also taking a global lead on launching a UN declaration on connectivity. And hopefully we will do that next year at Expo 2020 through our main summit that we will launch, not the virtual one, but the in-person one. And lastly, the most important thing is to bring the human back to the center of the system. We have to do the thinking, put the solutions, put the investments, and basically, if we talk about all these components, the 3 main aspects. One would be better teacher training, because we're going to focus on the teacher now. So we don't only train them on pedagogy, but we have to even enhance their morale, motivation. But we also have to prepare them to become school leaders, teach them on how to run a school, on how to do budgets. And once you perfect the teacher component, then we can move to the next level.
No, that is fantastic. I love putting people at the center, is something we obviously heard also in the last panel so profoundly. And what I'm hearing from both of you is also just in your lived experience and everything you've been doing and that your colleagues are doing, we have solutions, we have pathways, we're getting really critical things done, and we're now moving at an accelerated pace. And we can actually get to the SDGs by 2030. Mahmoud, Mohieldin, I want to turn next to you, and including on this question that we just heard about broader collaboration across the international system. It's obviously been, your career has been very much about that. But can you speak about especially the kind of underlying issues of poverty, of financing, of how we bring some of these threads together through that lens as well? And what do governments need to prioritize now as we come out of this crisis?
Right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Very happy, pleased, and honored to be among this distinguished panelists. And I like what Her Excellency Marri mentioned at the beginning about the interconnectedness of the SDGs at large. And actually, in the case of SDG 1, we're ending extreme poverty, I would add the dependence of the performance of ending extreme poverty on efforts and outcomes and performance of what we see on the rest of all of the SDGs. We cannot end extreme poverty if we don't really have a good health system, good quality education, good investment in infrastructure, without really putting sustainability and environment as a priority, without governance, and without partnerships. So this is basically the summary of the 17 goals that should be reflected on the extreme poverty. And actually, good work in these aspects have managed really to help us do very well in reducing extreme poverty in the world. Just the figures, back in 1993, the world was around 5.3 people, and the number of the extremely poor were around 2 billion, or to be exact, 1.9 billion. In the year 2017, we're around 7.5 billion people around the world, and the number of the extremely poor fell below 690 million people. What happened during the last few months is a shock to the system. And unlike the projections before, unlike the big expectations that we can really put extreme poverty on track and try to achieve the 2030 agenda, for the first time since 1998, we have seen the number of the extremely poor increasing. According to the World Bank figures, the number has increased between 90 million to 115 million. And with the continuation of the same kind of impact on the livelihood, the loss of jobs, the number could increase by an additional figure to get us into the neighborhood of 9.5% of the world population to be suffering from extreme poverty. What can we do about that? I think, as put with my good friend and member of the council, Carolina Sanchez, when we spoke about inequality, it's very much a political choice. Fighting poverty is a political choice, as fighting inequality is a political choice. Yes, we are facing some shocks, unprecedented shocks, but prioritizing the effort in dealing with extreme poverty, hand in hand with dealing with matters related to inequality. And I like, again, what was mentioned earlier related to education, especially education of girls, and putting gender at the center of the discussion. That would be very much helpful. But to your point about how can we do that, we're talking about huge investments. Either use the term recovering back better or recovering forward better, as the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, always like to mention, because many countries really may not really like to go back. They like to go forward because that back was not really that good anyway. So what we need really to do is to invest. And to invest here requires funding. And to be very brief about that, we need to do three things. First, to prevent two bad things from happening. We need to prevent a crisis in debt, and we need to prevent the leakage in the system of finance through illicit financial flows. That needs to end now. Meanwhile, we need to enhance the support of funding by going back to the principles of public-private finance, encouraging the private sector to do its job while prioritizing spending where it really matters. This requires very good coordinated effort, and I'd like to refer you to the good work and initiative by the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Jamaica and Canada, with big participation from around the world in how to deal with that in a time of crisis. So the solutions are there. It's all, again, about the political will to get that into action.
And we heard about political will in our earlier session as well. Pathways, partnerships, and decisions to prioritize the right things. I want to ask now, Dr. Judy Kuriansky, you chaired the Global Council on Health. And I'd love to hear a bit from you about the initiative that team has launched this year, what takeaways you have to share. And if you can, in that context, also reflect a bit on mental health. That's obviously your longest professional commitment. And it's a comparatively neglected issue, and we know how critical it is. So how do we also elevate some of those critical mental health issues on our agenda as well?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Definitely, as a psychologist, I'm very sensitive, having been involved in the negotiations for the SDG agenda way back when, starting in the beginning and putting well-being in the title of SDG 3. So it is health and well-being, and including promoting mental health and well-being in the target of 3.4. Exceptionally important. And what's critical is that so many people are suffering from post-traumatic stress, as they will, ongoing from this pandemic. But there is also, from a psychological point of view, what we call post-traumatic growth. Even the UN Secretary General has mentioned this last week at the UN General Assembly special session on COVID-19 and going forward, which we have an opportunity to really learn from the lessons and for everyone to move ahead in this decade of action to help people to recover, not only, and to become more empowered and to feel more resilient and to feel strength from what's actually happened. And the SDG, to tie this into what the SDG Global Council 3 has been doing, which is very exciting, is our project and our initiative called Health in Your Hands that you heard Layla speak about. This is a platform where we are bringing to the forefront the innovations about health, which really overlap all the other global councils that we've talked about in the SDGs, because we do see this as a nexus and as a coordinated kind of agenda moving forward. Education, we just heard about, eradicating poverty, gender equality, all of this comes together with health. And at this platform really are innovations around the world that actually promote health and bring health to those left furthest behind. So, for example, one of them that really shows the PPPs, the public-private partnership, is Village Reach. So what do they actually do? They use new technology, such an important part of the UAE and everything that is being done at the UAE with the innovation and new ideas. So this is the NGO. They bring together the governments of Malawi, for example, and Mozambique and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and private sector with Swoop Aero, bringing the ideas of these drones that will bring information to the people and reach those furthest behind. So you see, partnership is really critical in both our innovation and in the whole agenda, as you've talked about and everyone has mentioned here.
So, this is such a wonderful conversation. We have so little time, and I just would love to continue with you all for much longer, because this has been such a rich set of insights that you've all offered. I'd like to just conclude us with one very fast lightning round question to all of you. We're about to start a new year. It's the actual start of the decade of action. And if you had one word or one phrase that you want every government to take to heart as we enter this new year, I'd love to hear from you what that is to round out our discussion. And let's go in reverse order. Judy, what's the one word that you would want all governments to hear from you?
I think focusing on working together. It's been called multilateralism, but it's really working together that brings love and hope to all.
Wonderful. Tariq Al-Gurg, to you.
Sorry, was just switching my mic on. With me, it's if we're seeking paradigm shift, let's rewire education.
Excellent. Rewiring education, solidarity. Mahmoud.
Well, as we still live in uncertainty, the only way to go about it is to build the bridges of trust across nations. So I think it's a revival of the role of multilateralism with a rule-based system, with good solidarity and good trust among the main players to help the extremely poor.
Wonderful. And Marri, you have the final word.
I think the key to unlocking the world-changing potential of the 2030 agenda is through partnership, dialogue, and innovative action. Innovation is key in the coming years. And I believe that the COVID-19 crisis has inspired all of us to prioritize gender equality in a sustainable way. Thank you.
Well, thank you to you all. You've given us such rich insights about all the different ways we can truly put human potential first. You've shown what is possible. You're telling us what is already being done and what we need to accelerate to go forward, not back. I love that phrase, and to do that together.